Good morning and welcome to the Port of Los Angeles monthly media briefing. I'm Philip Sanfield, the Port's Communications Director, and as always, I'm joined by our Executive Director, Gene Seroka. Greetings, Gene.
Hello, Philip, and welcome, everyone. I understand that we have more than 50 regional, national, and international journalists joining us today. We appreciate your interest in the Port of Los Angeles and the opportunity to engage with the media each month. Today, we're honored to be joined by United States Acting Secretary of Labor, Julie Su. As most of you know, the Acting Secretary played a pivotal role in the tentative agreement reached on June 14th between the International Longshore and Warehouse Union and the Pacific Maritime Association. In just a few moments, we'll have the opportunity to delve into her work on that issue along with other labor-related topics. And of course, we look forward to addressing your questions as well. Let's begin with that closely watched, much anticipated West Coast labor contract that is now being considered by the ILWU and its membership. First, I want to thank both ILWU International President Willie Adams and President and CEO of the PMA, Jim McKenna, along with their respective negotiating teams, for their tireless work towards reaching this tentative deal. Collective bargaining is hard, yet the system worked, and Acting Secretary Su deserves so much credit for steering both sides towards resolution. And now, the ILWU will proceed with a democratic process involving a delegate caucus that represents all 29 West Coast ports. Later this month, these delegates will review the contract and determine whether to present it to a vote among the rank and file. Historically, it's taken about 3 months from the time a tentative agreement is reached until a full membership ratification vote happens. In the meantime, I've got full confidence in the ILWU system, its workers, and leadership. While I'm thrilled that we have a tentative deal, now the real work begins, and it will be an uphill climb. We need an industry-led coalition specifically focused on bringing cargo that is shifted to other gateways back here to the West Coast, and specifically Los Angeles. For my part, I'll be working harder than ever to connect importers, exporters, service providers, and others to share the ground truth about the capabilities and value proposition here at the Port of Los Angeles. Every 5 containers we handle in LA translates into a job. We take that very seriously. Meanwhile, we're collaborating with our partners to enhance efficiency at our terminals, rail facilities, and truck gates. And we're actively investing in projects that focus on advancing digitalization, sustainability, and infrastructure. Just last Thursday, California Governor Gavin Newsom, along with his Transportation Secretary, Tokso Mashakin, made a historic announcement awarding an unprecedented $1.5 billion in state grants. The aim of these funds is to build a supply chain that is more efficient, sustainable, and resilient. Our port received nearly $250 million, along with an additional $200 million dedicated to supporting regional programs. These funds will be utilized for critical projects that will help boost our competitiveness, create job opportunities, and further our decarbonization efforts. We're immensely grateful to Governor Newsom and Secretary Omashakin, along with our state legislators, for their unwavering dedication to the California freight system. So all things considered, we will utilize these funds and do whatever it takes to bring cargo back to the Port of Los Angeles.
Thank you, Gene. Before we welcome the Acting Secretary, please briefly share our latest June data and where we stand halfway through 2023.
Philip, I'm pleased to report that we had a very strong June. The Port of Los Angeles moved more than 833,000 20-foot equivalent units. That's just 5% off last June's all-time record and almost 6% above our 5-year running average for the month. In fact, June was our strongest performance since last July. And since February's low point, our cargo volume has increased a remarkable 70%, with 4 months of consecutive gains. We posted solid numbers across the board in June. On the import side, We handled 435,000 TEUs, just 2% less than last year. Exports came in at 108,000 TEUs, a 15% year-on-year increase. And we shipped 289,000 units of empties back to Asia, 13% above our 5-year average. So, at the midway point of 2023, here's where we stand. The Port of Los Angeles has handled 4.1 million TEUs. That's 23% less than our near record start last year, and 12% below our 5-year average. Looking ahead, we got a tentative labor deal in place, and the economy continues to be resilient. There was really good news this morning with inflation cooling for the 12th consecutive month. Consumer prices increased only 3% from a year earlier, and that's down from 4% in May. And Amazon is reporting that its Prime Days, which end tonight, are expected to be its best ever. And that's another great indicator that the consumers are still willing to spend. It's difficult, though, to forecast the remainder of the year. We do see some softness in July with 9 canceled sailings, so cargo will be down compared to June. Yet I'm optimistic that these last 6 months will outpace the first half of the year.
Thanks for that update, Gene. And now it's time to introduce our special guest. Gene, would you please do the honors?
Oh, it's my pleasure. Julie Su became Acting Secretary of Labor in March of this year. Prior to that role, she was confirmed by the United States Senate to serve as Deputy Secretary of Labor in July of 2021. I first had the pleasure of collaborating with Julie when she was Secretary for the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. In that position, she helped us resolve a conflict regarding autonomous equipment on our docks. And she actively supported our efforts to create innovative training programs, aligning with our vision of establishing the nation's first goods movement training campus. Acting Secretary Su, thanks for joining us today. What an honor.
Thank you so much, Gene. It's so good to see you.
You as well. Let's dive right in if it's okay. Your team and you have put in a lot of work to help the ILWU and PMA get over the finish line in that tentative deal. Tell us about the process and what you learned from it.
Okay, thank you, Gene. Let me first say thank you for your leadership there in Los Angeles. You have helped navigate the port through multiple crises, including certainly the last few years with COVID. I've learned a tremendous amount from working with you, and all of these congratulations and all the funding that you talked about. I think those are signs not just of the importance of the port, but of your leadership too. So let me answer that question. I flew into San Francisco on a Sunday. I did not intend, when I did so, to stay for the week. In fact, I packed only 2 suits for the trip. My plan was to go there and meet with the ILWU and the PMA to assess the situation and to see if I could be helpful. My goal was to really support the collective bargaining process, which, as you've laid out so clearly, is so valuable and so important. And I was there with the intent to be respectful of what the parties were doing. As you already said, they had been negotiating for 13 months and had grappled with some really difficult issues and resolved some of them, and there were a few left on the table. And so it was really an honor for me to get there, to be able to encourage them to stay at the table, to remind them, as they knew very clearly, how much was at stake, and to help support getting them across the finish line to a tentative agreement. And I think the most important lesson is that collective bargaining works. It is a process. It's a healthy process in which labor and management come together to address hard issues, to ensure that workers get a fair share, to plan for stability and resilience in an industry, in this case the ports, and to really lay down a path not just for today but for the future. And so it's no secret that we have a president who believes deeply in the collective bargaining process, as do I. And again, it was just a real honor to support them in that. I guess the other big lesson was that at the end of the day, these things are always about people, right? It's about people. It's about people working to make an honest living. It's about people wanting to be heard and respected, and wanting to find a win-win path forward. I will say that I apologize to everybody on day 3 for showing up in the same suit I came in on the first day, but they were very forgiving.
I'm sure they were. And with these 29 West Coast ports representing 12% of the U.S. economy, it's very clear that the Biden-Harris administration and your involvement were absolutely key, not just for those 3 days, but for all the work that you've done to develop those relationships over the past years. We really appreciate your efforts there, along with your staff.
Thank you.
Acting Secretary, shifting gears just a little bit, how do you see the state of the American worker today?
Right. So you talked about some of the, macroeconomic forces at play. I just want to put this moment also into context, right? 3 years ago, we were experiencing a pandemic-induced economic catastrophe. Today, since President Biden came into office, the economy has added 13.2 million jobs. To put that in perspective, in the 2008 Great Recession, it took 10 years to have that kind of jobs recovery. This is also matched by historic lows in unemployment. So the unemployment rate has been below 4% for almost a year and a half. So we're combining lots of job growth with low unemployment. And the unemployment rate is not just a broad average. It is also for African Americans, for Latinos, for Asian Americans, they're also experiencing historic low levels of unemployment. So the recovery, the strength of the economy is really broad-based. The other thing is that we are seeing historic levels of labor force participation, right? So all these things combined demonstrate, as you said earlier, real confidence in the economy and confidence among workers. We've seen workers who have quit jobs, but they quit them to take better jobs. That is what happens in a tight labor market, is workers have more power. Workers are able to demand, ask for, make decisions that improve their working and living conditions. That's a good thing if we want to build equity and long-term stability and security. And so I think these are all very positive things. And again, what we're talking about here with the ports was just one example of when you have an economy where workers do well and companies profit and America is strong, that's the fundamentals of Bidenomics, right? That's the kind of economy we want to see. And we are certainly seeing that when it comes to the situation for workers across America.
Oh, that's right. And as the president has said many times, even during his visit here to the Port of Los Angeles last summertime, we want to grow the economy from the middle out and from the bottom up, where everyone can prosper, from big organizations to folks on Main Street and putting dinner on the table every night. So that's very well put. Just one more question from my side, Acting Secretary. What are the big initiatives now that the Department of Labor is pushing that can help drive the American economy even further?
Well, we're all in on this vision of an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. And so for us, that begins with thinking about who has historically been at the bottom, who's at the bottom now. How do we make sure that we lift them into the good paying jobs that are being created? As you know well, Jean, the ports is one part of the overall supply chain, the overall strength of the economy. And the president, working with Congress, has put across the finish line historic investments in our nation's infrastructure, in manufacturing, right, in clean energy, in bringing jobs to the United States and making sure these are middle-class jobs, with a pathway to security. And, as you said, we don't just want new roads and safe bridges and clean drinking water out of every faucet and reliable broadband in every home. We also want those, we see them as opportunities to create good jobs in every community. So for the Department of Labor, we are laser focused on job quality, ensuring that jobs are good jobs, and also on connecting people to those jobs, connecting employers to the people they need. That comes through, and you mentioned this earlier, we worked together on this, it comes through effective training programs, oftentimes labor management training, so that training is tied to a specific job, right? People get the skills they need for a job that's coming into their community. And that is just one of the things that we are laser focused on. We started a Good Jobs initiative to help pursue this vision. And that initiative has worked with our sister agencies who are putting out this almost $2 trillion worth of federal funds to make sure that job quality and equity and workforce development are tied to those, and just really focusing on tried and true programs, but also innovative new programs, working alongside cities, and working to make sure that the workforce development system responds to the needs in this moment, and that we have the workers that we need, and that every single community feels like they are welcome to, and we want to tap into their talent to fill these jobs.
Outstanding. And that was the vision set many years ago. And our own Aveen Sharma has been working closely to get this program for our goods movement training campus off the ground. And it's a reality now with tremendous funding from the state of California, the Port of Los Angeles, along with the Port of Long Beach, and now our private sector partners knocking on the door trying to become involved. It was all that early vision you had when you were in Sacramento. So we're greatly appreciative. Thanks so much for your insights.
I appreciate it. I mean, that's work we did together, and that model, we know what works because we have worked on building it. And so just very, very, very excited to really support the work in California at the ports and the work all across the country to build up industry and to create a strong economy that is built on middle-class jobs.
That's right. And what we believe then, and we still do today, that what we can get done here is replicable across the country. Just awesome work. Philip, back over to you now for some questions from the media.
Thank you, Gene. We've gotten a lot of questions in advance, so time permitting, we'll try to take some from the Q&A box below. So if you have one, include your name and affiliation if using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. First question is for the acting secretary. It's from Dan Ronan of Transport Topics. In light of the breakdown in talks between UPS and the Teamsters, what is your level of concern? And will the administration get involved as it did with rail and dock workers?
Philip, thank you so much. So I said this already. I think the lesson from the great work and leadership of the ILW and the PMA is that the collective bargaining process works. It's a healthy process. Sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it's contentious. It isn't always pretty, but at the end of the day, it leads to results that are beneficial for workers, beneficial for industry, and ultimately beneficial for America. So I believe in that process. We believe in that process. The leadership of those two parties, of UPS and Teamsters, have been at the table. They've actually also resolved some very hard issues. The Teamsters have been very public about their process. And so we are certainly monitoring, but remain very hopeful that the parties will get where they need to go, and supportive and respectful of their role in that.
Thank you. On a similar topic, another question for you, Acting Secretary Sue, from Vanessa Yurkovich of CNN. In addition to the UPS Teamster situation, the United Auto Workers have stated they're prepared to strike against the big three U.S. automakers. Do you expect to play a role in the auto talks which start this week? And how concerned are you about both of these conflicts with respect to potential strikes and economic impacts?
Right. So let me just first take one step back. I will answer that question, but I think this relates to the idea of in a tight labor market, workers have more power, unions have more power, and so that is shaping some of what is happening at the bargaining table. I would say, and I think the president has been very clear that he intends to be the most pro-worker, pro-union president in history. I'm proud to support that vision, and part of that is recognizing that that bargaining has to happen, and that we have to respect that process, and that the results that come out mean that the president's vision of an economy where workers get their fair share, right? Workers do well, and companies profit, and America is stronger. That's not only possible, but that is the path forward. So that's the big picture of I think what we're seeing is unions organizing and workers standing up in industries and workplaces across the country. As to UAW, we're very, very early in that process. The parties are going to come to the table. They're going to negotiate. I think, just as I said about the ILW and the PMA, everyone is well aware of what is at stake, and they're going to need to go through their process. And when they get to the other side, I'm hopeful that that what results is what we've seen over decades of labor management negotiations, which is something that is a win for everybody.
Thank you. The next question is for Jean from Laura Curtis of Bloomberg. How much of the June boost in cargo do you attribute to shippers opting to bring their goods back to LA now that there's a tentative agreement? And what are your plans to convince even more of them to come back west?
Well, thanks for joining again this month, Laura. I have not seen a massive shift back of cargo owners who had moved to East Gulf Coast ports as well as British Columbia. But the cargo was seasonal. It's the back to school, the summer fashion that had already been here, fall fashion, and then starting to see the early reaches of peak season. Please remember, about 15% of our cargo left during these negotiations, really starting last August. And history has shown that some of it will stick to those East and Gulf Coast ports. So our job now is to be absolutely relentless in going after every pound of freight possible. I think our attributes are well known, but they have to be codified once again. Our geographic position, the best way to and from Asia is through the Southern California Gateway. Our innovation, digital process management, supply chain solutions, all emanate from the Port of Los Angeles. The infrastructure is world-class, accentuated by the California governor's budget line items that we talked about earlier, and we will continue to pursue all available federal funding from the infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and any means possible. I'll be in D.C. 2 more times this month alone, continuing to pound the pavement and see what we can do with the appropriators and others to keep their focus here in Southern California. And as I mentioned, it's got to be an industry-led coalition. No one individual or organization can do this by themselves, and it really is capitalizing on the great institutional knowledge that lives and breathes here every day in Southern California. Our brokerage and freight communities, the forwarders and custom house brokers, the warehousing complex with more than 2 billion square feet, terminal operators, shipping lines, our great Longshore workers, and all the other folks that are combined from truckers, et cetera, to supply chain experts. So it's a whole approach here, but realistically speaking, I like our chances, but we've got to get out there and continue to run back and forth with the necessary stakeholders and the decision makers to bring this cargo back. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Gene. Next question is for Acting Secretary Sue from Eric Watkins of Cargomatic. You've been awarded a MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant and have a strong background in labor negotiations. Can you tell us what strategy you employed to help the ILWU and PMA reach a deal? And do you think it will be ratified and create peace on the docks for the next 6 years?
Oh my gosh, well, thank you. So I think that I don't know. To me, I approached the conversations, and as Jean mentioned, it was not just the time in San Francisco, but conversations with both President Willie Adams, whose leadership has been phenomenal, as well as Jim McKenna at PMA, and the organizing, the bargaining committees, the actual members, with just tremendous respect for their role. And I think that was very important. I was there not to tell them what to do, but to help support the process that they were in. So I think being able to listen, being able to be respectful, being able to, again, be a reminder of everything that was at stake and helping to see a path forward. I would say those are that was the mindset that I brought with me. At this point, now the ratification process has to happen. And as I said several times when I was there, the only people who can decide whether this is a fair contract is the members themselves. That's part of the process, and I deeply respect that. But I am proud of the work that the parties did to get to this tentative agreement. Again, there were some very difficult issues that they addressed. And I think that it is always a good thing when workers get the wages, the benefits, the security that they need. And so we'll see what happens in that process. And if it is ratified, then the president and I will be ready to celebrate with them.
Thank you. Eric is following up with a question for Jean. It's early and the agreement is tentative, but are you seeing any signs that shippers who diverted cargo to the Eastern and Gulf ports will be headed back to the West Coast?
Thanks, Eric. Good to hear from you. Yeah, sure. In my daily, hourly conversations with importers and exporters, there is a common theme about wanting that confidence to bring the cargo back here, and some are in the midst of doing that. It takes about a month or a month and a half to change allocations, to stipulate which vessel, which gateway to use, etc. Working all the way back off your purchase order with a manufacturer, or for the ranchers, growers, ag folks here in the United States to redesign their supply chains. It's not that difficult, but it does take some time in pulling all of these partners together. This is not a transactional business. The ships don't simply just turn on their blinker and make a left-hand turn back into LA. It takes a little bit of work and a little bit of finesse to get this going. But it all starts with the confidence. And just as Julie said in her work, it's still a relationship-based business. And that's where we've got to get out there. Today, on my flight tonight, back out to D.C., I'm going to attend the U.S. Agriculture's Export Conference, where we'll have a number of folks, including the Soybean and Specialty Grain Council, among others, in attendance to talk about how we're going to get that supply chain on the export side moving back our way through Southern California. For many of the ag folks with identity preserved products, meaning that there is no chemical that goes into those products that come out of the ground. Think of number 5 red wheat, soybeans, cotton, etc. They want direct services to Asia. Los Angeles and Long Beach offer the most direct services to points of destination in Asia than any other port in the United States. That's what we're going to try to capitalize on this week during a short trip back to Washington. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. The next question is from Rebecca Rainey of Bloomberg Law, and this is for the acting secretary. Is the administration prepared to invoke Taft Hartley if union members reject the contract agreement at the UPS or Big Three?
So it is way premature to even talk about that, but I want to be very clear that when the president says that he is a pro-worker and pro-union president, that means something. That includes the right of workers to bargain and to form a union and to exercise all of their rights. So I think we remain hopeful about how this process will turn out. We are grateful for the hard work of the parties to get to where they are, and let's see what happens in the next couple months.
Thank you. Acting Secretary, several reporters have asked your thoughts on where your Senate confirmation process stands today for the Secretary of Labor position.
Thank you. So I am so honored to have been chosen by the president to do this job. I am serving as both the acting secretary and as the president's nominee, and the confidence that he's placed in me to help him, as he says, finish the job of this administration, to help continue to build the economy, to build the long-term strength and resilience of the economy, to ensure that it is equitable and that we leave no one behind, to stand up and to scale effective workforce programs to connect people to the good jobs we're creating and employers the people they need. All of that is work that I am deeply passionate about and grateful to have the opportunity to do. I remain hopeful about confirmation. That is obviously going to be something that the Senate will have to decide, but I've had many senators, lots of interactions, and many senators who've expressed a lot of support, along with labor and business, all of which I'm also very grateful for. Listen, I can walk and chew gum at the same time. So we can work toward confirmation as well as do the really important work of American workers and the American people in my role as acting secretary.
Thank you. Next question is for Jean from Donna Littlejohn of the Southern California News Group. On the environmental front, is it possible or even likely that the ZE emission deadlines of 2030 and 2035 won't be met on schedule, and will technology come online in time?
Thanks for joining us as always, Donna. Yeah, it's a concern, and it's something that I work on personally every single day. This quest for us to get to zero emissions, our own goals of 2030 for all cargo handling equipment and originally 2035 for all trucks remains intact and now codified by state regulation as well on the trucking side. We've got to spend our time, now that the table has been set, on accelerating the technology and finding the funding streams, both public and private, to get this new technology to commercial availability. And think about it too, not only the price. The electric truck, the Class 8 heavy-duty truck variety, is going right now for about $450,000 plus, and associated infrastructure. The hydrogen fuel cell technology for heavy-duty Class 8 trucks starts at about $700,000 or $800,000. And as you know, Donna, working here in the port complex, the average trucker who makes $67,000 a year doing port drayage business buys their trucks on the tertiary market for about $50,000, and that's of the diesel variety. So we've got to continue to find ways to make this technology affordable, and not just on the price tag. You've got to have spare parts. You have to have mechanics who are trained to fix the trucks, drivers who are trained, whether it be at the Longshore level or in other disciplines outside the port complex, to be able to operate this new equipment. Again, about 5,000 pieces of that yard equipment, 20,000 trucks. We look at an investment right now of in excess of 20 billion US dollars. Now that number will change, but it's the best we have to go on right now. We also need a statewide plus regional plan on infrastructure. If you think in your mind's eye about how all these trucks move today, and again, about 2/3 of the business here at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach move in and out by truck, it's going to be interesting to see if we can cobble together this infrastructure plan simply by overlaying a map of where the diesel gas stations are. That's where we're going to need to have those fueling facilities for hydrogen and the charging stations for battery electric. This port doesn't have a gas station today, and that's purposeful because we want it to be a transit facility. Where those truckers go, where the trucks rest in the evenings or when they're non-operating, and where the pathways happen along the 10, 60, 91 freeways, or we have to look deep for that investment. So our resolve has never been greater, Donna, and we're going to try our level best, but it can't be done again by one organization alone. This has got to be a private-public sector partnership with public policy that can drive to success. So we'll keep you updated as always. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Gene. We're going to try to squeeze in 2, maybe 3 more questions in the next 10 minutes. Gene, 1 for you, and then either 1 or 2 more for the acting secretary. Gene, on the you've said that the port fends off 40 million cyber intrusion attempts a month, a staggering number that's hard to grasp. And by the way, I'm sorry, this is from Michael Lev of Chainmail. And he's saying recently the port of Nagoya was shut down by a reported ransomware attack. Can you talk about the current seriousness of cyber threats to U.S. ports, your concerns, and briefly security efforts?
Thanks for joining again, Michael. Good to hear from you. And this is another one of the biggest issues that we work on every day. Led by Head of Public Safety and Port Police Chief Tom Gazy, as you remember, we opened the first Cybersecurity Operations Center for a port in the nation back in September of 2014, a great partnership with the Department of Homeland Security. And for updated information, Michael, as we close the first half of the year, we now average 54 million cyber intrusion attempts per month, and we've stopped all of them. In the month of June alone, we stopped more than 60 million cyber intrusion attempts here at the Port of Los Angeles. And because of all that work, we co-sponsored with IBM the opening of one of the world's first cyber resilience centers back in December of 2022. That cyber resilience center has now more than 24 partners, including the Longshore members of the ILWU and their associated locals. That CRC has stopped 12 unknown cyber intrusion attempts to date that were headed directly for private sector partners. There's much more work to do. We have to stay steps and steps ahead of the bad guys, but I'm very pleased with the effort that Chief Gazy has led, along with Tony Jung and Sheba here at the Port of LA, to make sure that we are the head of the class in this area. The Port of Nagoya have been friends of ours for a long time. I think it's now the 63rd year of our sister city and sister port relationship. Kamada-san, who heads up the port's a good friend of mine in the industry. We just recently signed a new and updated MOU that includes both digitalization and cybersecurity. I feel terrible for what they went through, but it heightens the awareness of all. And if there are best practices we can take from here in Los Angeles to Nagoya, we'll continue to do that, plus others from around the world. I appreciate the question, but this is top of mind for us every day, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. This is going to be the final question, so we can let the acting secretary go, and it's from Lorianne LaRocco of CNBC. She is saying that last week CNBC reported that you've spoken to the Canadian Labour Minister about the dock workers' strike in Canada, which is now in its 12th day. What are your thoughts on this strike, and what impacts are you monitoring for the U.S. economy?
Okay, thank you so much for that. I did speak with my counterpart in Canada. We had a good conversation. I wanted to share some of the experiences that I had had. Obviously, he approaches it with similar. The stakes are very high, and he wants to be helpful. I know the situation is very fluid, so I don't want to speak more to that. But we did have a conversation, and if there's sometimes just sharing of experiences can be very helpful in these kinds of situations, and that's why we connected.
Very good. Thank you. Gene, that concludes our media questions. Back to you for final thoughts.
Thanks, Philip. And Acting Secretary Sue, thank you again for your leadership and work on the ILW PMA deal. We really appreciate your time today. But most of all, thank your staff and you for all you're doing for the country. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gene.
In closing, I'd like to share some exciting news about AltaSea, an urban marine research institute located right here at the Port of Los Angeles. This organization is dedicated to oceanic education and sustainable business practices. In June, AltaSea broke ground on the main campus of its ocean tech hub called the Center of Innovation. Just 10 years ago, that space was 4 100-year-old warehouses sitting empty on 35 acres in the port's outer harbor. Now, those historic buildings are being transformed into modern facilities that can be utilized as offices, classrooms, and laboratories. The structures will also have an impressive rooftop solar system that can generate 2.2 megawatts of energy. That's enough power to sustain the AltaSea campus along with 700 homes. AltaSea's mission is to be the hub for scientific innovation, collaboration, and entrepreneurship focused on ocean conservation and exploration. Yet, even in this initial phase, it's already influencing many aspects of the blue economy's potential. For example, AltaSea's Project Blue digitally engages students in marine science and technology while also highlighting emerging job pathways for consideration. And AltaSea is bringing together marine scientists and engineers to conduct research that will nurture new and existing businesses to create ocean-related products, services, and jobs. Efforts like these are introducing a whole new dimension to the Port of LA's economic engine, while also making the city itself an emerging hub for the blue economy. Our oceans are critical to sustaining us today and for generations to come. The Port of Los Angeles is proud to partner with AltaSea as it strives to meet that challenge. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to being with you again in August. Take care, everyone.